Hello everyone, and welcome back to Be Like Christ for our Bible study through Joshua chapter 9. We are trying to do a chapter a day in 5 minutes, and we've made it all the way to Joshua chapter 9. We've already done the first 5 books of the Bible, so if this is your first time with us, welcome. Let's talk about our questions for this chapter. When did these events happen? We are in approximately 1450 BC, about 1450 years before Jesus was born, and the Israelites have just gone into the Promised Land and have begun the conquest, and so that places Joshua 9 about 1450 BC. Our characters for this chapter, our main character for pretty much the whole book of Joshua, and the one who the book is named after is Joshua, who's the leader of the Israelites. God appointed him to be leader after Moses died at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. We're also going to talk about the Gibeonites in chapter 9. They dressed up as foreigners and tricked the leaders of the Israelites into making a peace treaty with them. It's an interesting story, and that's what we're going to talk about in our outline. And then jumping on down to our map, where did these events take place? The cities of the Gibeonites are key to chapter 9. The cities included Gibeon, which is on the map, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. You can find the list of those in verse 17. The Israelites, we're told, were camped at Gilgal, and the approximate location of Gilgal is also on the map. The first section that I have in this chapter is verses 1 through 15. The Gibeonites trick Israel. So when the kings of the coast, the Hittites, the kings of the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of the overthrow of the city of Ai, which we talked about in our last chapter, they were terrified that the Israelites were coming for them next, and they planned to ally together to fight against Israel. But another group of people, known as the Gibeonites, they had another plan. Some men from Gibeon dressed themselves in old clothes, patched up sandals, put worn-out saddlebags on their donkeys, and put dried food in their bags, and approached the camp of Israel to speak with Joshua. And they lied, and they told Joshua that they had traveled a really long distance from a faraway land to make a covenant of peace with Israel. And looking at the map on the last page, you'll see that Gibeon's not really that far from Israel, right? So they're definitely trying to pull the wool over Joshua's eyes. Now, some of the Israelite men questioned the Gibeonite story. They were like, how do we know you're not like from a couple hills over, right? But the Gibeonites offered as evidence their worn out clothes, their burst wineskins, their old crumbly bread. And they said, look, we have evidence that we're telling the truth. And in the end, Joshua ended up agreeing and making a covenant of peace with them. Now, what's interesting is that in verse 14, we are told specifically that the Israelite leaders failed to ask God for counsel in this matter. They failed to go to God and ask him, hey, should we make a treaty of peace with these guys or not? The Gibeonites tricked Israel just long enough to get what they wanted, because in verses 16 through 27, we find the Gibeonites' lie being exposed. So 3 days later, the Israelites learned that the Gibeonites were lying and that they were actually their neighbors. Even after the lie was exposed, though, Israel did not make war with Gibeon or any of the other Gibeonite cities because of the oath that they had sworn before the Lord to make peace with them. So instead of killing the Gibeonites, the Israelites made them their servants for carrying wood and for drawing water. And Joshua summoned the Gibeonite men, and he asked them why they had lied to them in the first place, why they had lied about their identity. And they told him that it was because they were aware of God's instructions to the Israelites to destroy all of the inhabitants of the land. And so they knew that their only chance to survive was to pretend that they were from some far-off country. And, well, kind of worked. So that is Joshua chapter 9. We are going to talk about the Gibeonites some more, and this treaty of peace that's made, that's going to come into play in chapter 10. So more Gibeonites in chapter 10. Now, let's talk about our application. I think the application for this chapter is is the obvious one that I think the author of this text wants you to take away from it, and that is, don't forget to ask God for help when making your decisions. There's so many variables to every decision, and there's no way for our limited minds with our limited knowledge to account for all of them. We need to ask God for help. We should want God's help with even the smallest decisions of our daily lives. So as often as you can remember, take a moment to ask God for wisdom before making your decisions.